Meet PitchDB, the ultimate platform for speakers looking to make their mark on podcasts, conferences, and media outlets. PitchDB provides access to over 3 million platforms, ensuring you find the perfect avenue for your message. With AI integrations, your bios and pitches are tailored uniquely to each opportunity, giving you the edge you need. Join now at pitchdb.com.
Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. This is Your Brand Amplified. I'm Anika Jackson here with Brian Childress. Brian, I love that your bio starts with you being a husband and a father before you get into your work life. So thank you for bringing that balance to the forefront. I think this is something I'm seeing more with men in business and that we need more of. Because my bio also opens with, I'm first and foremost a mother. And that is the most important thing I'll do. But I also love my work life. So your work life, you're a technologist and you have a very vested interest in personal brand, business building. So I'd love for you to be able to share your story a little bit, your journey, and where you are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I would say my journey has not been a straight or, smooth path by any means, but I'm really excited about the things that I've learned along the way. And when I look back, I'm pretty impressed with kind of all the things that I've gotten to experience. And so, I'm a software engineer, software architect by trade and training. And I work as a technical advisor to a number of different companies now. I get to work with startups and small and medium businesses as they're developing their software platforms.
Software is something I was looking at something that I recorded for the Intuit Business Council. And I think I said I use 25 different systems every day at work life. And it's something that's so important, right? In everything we do, everything we touch these days. But I think sometimes we forget about it and we don't think about what goes into creating the systems that we use. So was this something you were always interested in? Was this where you saw your career going?
No, it was not. I was not the kid, at 8 years old, programming on my family's computer. I was not, playing video games and that sort of thing. It wasn't me. Honestly, I didn't really get into technology the way that I am now until I went back to graduate school. And it was at that point that I really found that technology was something that I was good at and I really understood, and I was able to use kind of both the creative side of my brain and the analytical engineering-based side of my brain. And I really just kind of dove straight in. So most of my career, I've not only worked, full-time in a software engineering type role, but I've also been freelancing and moonlighting on the side as well. So I like to think that I've gotten a lot more years of experience since I've been in the industry just by doing both.
Yeah, absolutely. What is that like to balance that, though, with everything else, with your family and everything else that you're doing?
I kind of treat it like just another engineering challenge, honestly. But it's really important to really focus on those priorities. And for me, the time that I'm working is the time that I'm working, but then I really cherish family time. Mm-hmm. And I make sure that I'm always available every morning to make breakfast and pack lunch and do all of those sorts of things and, ride my bike to school drop off. And then on the same side, as soon as, it's time to end for the day, that is it. So I really try and prioritize and then find that balance. And it can be challenging at times, but I really make sure that family and those things are kind of top of mind. Work will always find a way to fill in the voids.
Yeah, that's no joke. So what kind of projects do you typically work on? And that's part one. And then part two is, what have you seen change in technology and software since the inception of your career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I work on a number of different projects across a number of different industries. To give you kind of an example, I've got projects in the cybersecurity space, in freelancing marketplaces. I've got projects in healthcare, very AI and machine learning based healthcare projects. I've got other projects in education technology or in fintech. So really across the board. And it may seem like a lot in a lot of different industries, but what I've really found is that most of those projects have the same challenges. They all are dealing with large amounts of data. Usually it's very sensitive data, especially in the healthcare and in the finance spaces. But, a lot of the same challenges exist. And I've found that being able to work across projects, across a number of industries and technologies, I'm able to bring learnings from one project into other projects. It's been very much a benefit. And, I've certainly seen technology evolve over my career. And I think, us as humans and consumers have really felt that change over the last 10 or 15 years, right? The advent of the smartphone has completely changed the way that we live our lives. And I've really focused my career and then my business on the ability to do most of my work from my cell phone. So as long as I have an internet connection, I can do a bulk of what I need to do anywhere in the world. And to me, that's an extremely freeing thing. It really kind of blows my mind still just how much technology has progressed in such a short period of time and the things that I'm able to do from something like a mobile device. And then in many ways, a lot of technology, the way that we build software hasn't really changed since the way that we did things back in the 50s and 60s. Things are faster. It's a bit easier. It's much easier for folks to get into the industry and be able to contribute effectively. And I think those things have changed, but a lot of the things that we were doing back then, we're still doing today.
What is one of the things that you see people do wrong when you come in? You act as a fractional chief technology officer, as you were saying, you consult with a lot of different businesses. When you get in there, is it usually when they're starting the process? Is it when they realize that, oh my gosh, we need somebody to come in here because we don't know what we're doing and we made a couple mistakes? Or is it both of those situations and many more?
A little bit of both, but most often the latter. Part of the reason that I work across a number of different industries is I typically come into projects that are already established. They already have some sort of software product that's been developed, and they are running into those challenges. They're, I don't know what we're doing. We're having trouble either growing the team or growing the application. We may have security concerns that we want to have somebody come in and help us address. So a lot of what I tend to do is come in once that project is already kind of underway. And what I like to say is kind of get them going back in the right direction, whether it's building a new foundation or steering the ship in the right direction.
Yeah. So do you think people tend to overcomplicate the process or the software that they're trying to develop?
100%. Absolutely, I do. Well, software and technology in general is complex already. And what we tend to do as software engineers when we have an opportunity to solve a problem is we make it even more complex for ourselves. And then as things continue to grow and evolve, we just get to a point where things are so complex that we aren't able to move effectively and solve business challenges. And so a lot of times what I end up doing is trying to remove as much of that complexity as possible and just focus so much on simple solutions, because really most businesses, that's what they need, is a simple solution that multiple teams and groups of engineers can continue to contribute to help ultimately grow the business.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to use names, because I understand probably a lot of, like you said, you work with a lot of sensitive industries. Do you have a favorite project that you were able to come in and turn around and create a, quantifiable, huge difference right away that they were like, oh my gosh, we wish that we'd brought Brian in sooner?
I mean, there's quite a few. The one that comes to mind, and I've been talking a bit about it recently, earlier this year, I was brought into a project that when someone reached out to me, the project was already, I think, 3 weeks behind its final deadline for delivery. And unfortunately, nothing in the project was working end to end. There were bits and pieces that worked, but nothing end to end. And so when I joined the project, I came in and it was very much that scenario of, wow, this is overly complex. It's far more than we need. Let's start with simplifying. And one of the interesting challenges with this particular project was we had an immovable deadline. Most software projects have arbitrary deadlines, right? We hope to deliver this in Q3 of this year. But this one in particular had an immovable deadline. If we didn't deliver the project, it was just ultimately unsuccessful by that specific time frame. So I had to work very, very quickly and understanding what had been built, what was the problem we were trying to solve, and then what capabilities did the existing team already have. And so really I came in and I would say within a day or so had completely re-architected the solution. Within a few more days, we were already moving in that direction. And then within a week, kind of had everything working end to end. And for me, that was a huge, huge win. And I think, what I really saw from that was the team was excited again. They were kind of down and aggravated and upset with the progress that was being made. And then when we started to see some really, really good, strong progress and things were moving, that really increased our momentum, allowed us to hire additional developers really quickly to continue to contribute. And I think ultimately, in my mind, the project was a really big success. We were able to deliver on time before that immovable deadline. It was much more simple, and I think it was a much more effective solution in the end.
Nice. I love hearing that because honestly, the finance and the technical side of things is not my forte. So, yeah. And I think we often think of engineers in the same vein of accountants and, people who just have very analytical minds. To me, what I'm hearing is that you also have to be really creative at finding the right solutions. And yeah, there is a lot of analytics behind it. But you have to be able to kind of zoom out and see what they really need rather than being stuck in the details and trying to, as you said, overcomplicate things in the details.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how people find you. Like, you have to obviously have an established brand. And again, I think sometimes we don't think about, when we think about personal brands, we think about beauty products, consumer goods, big splashy companies. We don't think about our technical officers and software engineers having a brand. So at what point did you realize that that was part of the work that you needed to do to put yourself out there? And how have you developed your personal brand?
Well, I think I recognized that I really wanted to start establishing myself really as a kind of an industry thought leader, right? That was my big goal written on my vision board. And I started, maybe 6 years ago or so with just creating my own kind of personal website. And when I started, I wanted just a place for me to put my own note. I wasn't thinking about it from a branding perspective, but ultimately it did help kind of guide me in that direction. Some of the other things that I did beyond, kind of writing regularly on a particular platform was, I pushed against my comfort zone and started public speaking. And so I started applying and getting accepted to speak at national and international conferences around technology and starting to put the ideas and the things that I was learning, in the day-to-day work that I was doing, kind of sharing that with the broader, technology ecosystem and industry. And from there, that momentum just started to build and build. Maybe 18 months ago or so, I started posting regularly on LinkedIn, and I think that's continued to really help in developing that brand. Being on podcasts just like this has been really beneficial as well to kind of get my name out there. A lot of the ideas that I think about and, some of the ways that, technologists like myself might be able to help make a positive impact for businesses.
I want to flag so many things that you said is important, starting with vision board. I think you're the first male guest I've had who's talked about, expressing your ideas and your vision for the future with a vision board. So I love that. Love that you shared that. I think it's really important to think about, we have to think about how we're going to approach our goals and what we see for our future. And vision boarding is a great way to do it. So so I'm really impressed. Thank you for sharing that. And then I love the fact that you stepped outside of your comfort zone because you knew that you had this expertise that you could share. And you realized, and this is something we always try to reinforce in the world of branding and PR, it's not about you, it's about what you can share. It's about that information that you have. So while it is about you, it often helps to think when, for people who don't like to public speak, if you take yourself out of the equation and realize that what you're sharing is bigger and more important and can really help a lot of people, that's where you find that energy and that sweet spot to push through that discomfort.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think some of the biggest opportunities that we can experience in life are just on the other side of that fear that we feel, right? And so public speaking for me was one of those areas of fear, right? The feelings of, imposter syndrome or, any of those kind of terms and ideas, pushing ourselves so that we can, ultimately, like you say, share that knowledge and get that knowledge out there because, we've spent so much time, learning and understanding and growing ourselves. If I can help just one person grow just a little bit, then I think it's worth it. And that's enough to kind of push me through that fear that I might feel.
Yeah. In this world global world, you can work with people from all over. A lot of times I get emails from companies overseas who are like, we develop apps, we develop software. I've tried working with a couple for websites. And I know that people have really good experiences with that. Mine was not as positive, I think, because of my busyness, the schedules, trying to communicate, using different language, perhaps. So do you work with teams overseas? Have you seen that as a positive or a negative or a neutral with companies that you work with when they try to hire overseas teams? Might be or might not be the right fit.
I'll have to give the classic IT answer of it depends, but I have seen it go both really well and unfortunately a lot of times see it go really, really poorly, which it sounds like may have been your experience there. And it is very true that we have an opportunity to work with developers around the globe. And for me, I think that's hugely beneficial. I have the privilege of working with engineers in Eastern Europe to Latin America, the Philippines, India, a ton of different places. And there are really, really strong engineers around the globe. It can be difficult to find folks to work with that we can trust and rely upon. And I think that's a challenge. And, the horror stories that we hear about, working with teams that aren't, we can't necessarily reach out and touch. That's a big challenge, is establishing that trust and finding someone that we can really rely upon. So I do work with a lot of those teams and I help my clients find teams that they can trust and then make sure that, as much as we trust and believe in what they can provide for us, make sure that we have some safeguards in place so that at the end of the day, our intellectual property and the code and what could potentially be our entire business is protected in some way so that if things didn't go well, we're at least in an okay position to then, potentially find a new person to work with.
Yeah. Well, and then my follow-up question was, is there a list of, I love that you mentioned guardrails, but is there a list of questions or things that you should make sure you know before you hire somebody overseas, particularly for software development?
One of the biggest things that I look for is how many questions they ask me. How curious are they about the business, the project, the problem that we're trying to solve? A lot of times, one of the biggest red flags that I see is when I bring a project to an individual or a team and I say, I want to build this thing. If there's not a lot of questions that follow that, I consider that to be a red flag, because what we see a lot of times is we kind of get put into a box and your application looks like this other application. And it may not be the case, right? I might have very unique needs. I might only have a few users that I need to support. So I don't need something that's overly complex or globally scalable or anything along those lines. And so if they're not asking me a lot of questions, that's something I kind of look out for. The other thing that I look out for, is what is the ownership model? And I want to make sure as the person that's commissioning a project that I'm in full ownership of the code, the intellectual property, all of the domains and accounts. I want to make sure that I'm in control of that so that, I always maintain, my own business, right? Because the thing that I'm asking these folks to create could be my entire business. I could potentially be spending my entire life savings to build that out. And so I want to make sure that I can maintain that. Other things to look out for, if we start to kind of prescribe a set of technologies right out of the gate, or we need to build this, or it needs to look this way, really trying to dive into why did they make those decisions? What is it that I said about my project that makes this individual or this team think, oh, we need to do it in this way? Again, kind of back to the being overly prescriptive before they understand the business really well or the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah. That I think is so important. And I love the idea of it's not just about what questions you can ask, but it's about what questions they ask of you to make sure they really understand the project. I think that actually applies far beyond software and technology to anybody looking to hire, whether it's overseas or not.
Oh, I absolutely agree. No, I like to say, like in the software industry, that technology is the easiest part of what we do. Ultimately, it's that collaboration, it's that communication. Those are the most challenging areas and where we have the most opportunity to kind of go awry. The technology is just another tool that we use to solve a particular problem, but we need to make sure we understand that problem first.
Absolutely, definitely. When somebody has an idea for something new, and this again is not just about software, I think it applies to any industry. So many people start things when there are already so many things that exist that do something very similar. So when you are talking to somebody about a new software solution, is it always a good thing to start something new, or do you take a step back and kind of evaluate what else is already in the landscape that might be useful?
Oh, 100%. No, I think it's very useful to see what else is out there. Where are the limitations, right? And that may be the opportunity is, well, there are a number of different, platforms or packages available, but they have all had this limitation. Let me fill that void in the industry. That's a potential opportunity. But no, I think it's always important to see what is available and how can I potentially, change the way that I operate to work within that platform instead of going through the long and arduous and often expensive process of developing something custom. Really, the biggest thing when I'm evaluating those types of ideas is really validating the idea. Who in the market besides myself has this same problem? And really the first step of that is just going out and talking to a lot of people, right? People that are not within my kind of bubble. They aren't my friends or my family. I'm going out and talking to others like me and trying to understand if they have the same challenges that I do or maybe slightly different challenges. And that validation step can really, really save you a lot of time and ultimately money in potentially avoiding something no one else needs.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And AI is a topic that's on everybody's minds. On my side of things, marketing and PR, I've seen how it can be challenging. For instance, I teach university, so it can be challenging for us as professors to think about our students using AI to generate their papers or not, right? And how do we test that? But on the other side, it can be really helpful with, I need to write a blog post. Here are some concepts that I have, but I want the language to be a little bit better. My brain is fried. I can't think anymore. AI spits something out that sounds a little bit more flourished than what I put in there. But for software, how is AI changing the way that you do things on the technical side? Do you see it as a help or hindrance to software development for the future?
I think I see it as a superpower, right? I think it's really supercharging the way that we develop software. It's just making us much faster, more efficient. I think there are still challenges, just like I'm sure you're seeing in, what we write in blog posts and that sort of thing. But as far as software goes, like I'm not concerned that AI or the robots are necessarily going to take my job. But I do think that software engineers that use AI are going to continue to surpass their peers that aren't adopting the technology. And for me, I see it as just another tool in my tool belt. In order to use AI effectively, we still need some level of experience and expertise so that we can understand whatever the AI tool is generating, is it actually good? Is it the thing that I need? Because oftentimes what I'm finding is it gets me pretty far, in something that was taking me maybe an hour to put together myself with some very concise prompts that I can ask the tool, I might get something, really, really good in 10 seconds or 30 seconds. So, it's just really supercharging my workflow. But it's not 100%, right? It may be 90 or 95% accurate, and I may have to go in there and massage and kind of tweak what was generated. But the fact that I can generate something that quickly, that gets me that much closer to my end goal, which is just building something to solve a business need, I think that is really, really powerful.
And if you were going to give advice to somebody going into the field, what would you recommend that they do as their first steps? Would you recommend that they go through and get a master's? Would you recommend that they take certain certifications?
I think if someone's looking to get into software development, my advice is to just start developing software. Just start building, because there needs to be some foundational knowledge. Absolutely. I think we're extremely fortunate that in today's time, there is so much valuable information on the internet, on YouTube. I could buy a simple course that's going to teach me quite a bit to get things moving. And I would encourage folks to really dive in and just start building. If there's a Zoom or a Slack clone that we want to create, build that on our own and learn what it takes and go through those troubleshooting exercises, because the things that we learn in school are not necessarily the things that we do in our day-to-day work. And so if we're building something, then we get a bit better exposure to what our day-to-day work looks like. And if we enjoy that, then absolutely start to augment that with additional education and resources so that we can kind of build in those foundations. But I think seeing if it's something that you enjoy, that's really where I would start, because you can do that with an internet connection and a simple laptop.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that, because there's so much debate right now. I also work in workforce development and education on what do you really need for the skill sets of the future. Now, I'm also a university professor, so obviously I value education, but I also know exactly what you said. What you do in practice is not necessarily what you learn in the books, or the theory of something. So having that practical application. And I love that you also said, make sure it's something you really enjoy doing.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than investing 2 or 4 years into something and then getting out and learning it. And, I've done that myself. So, I think it's important to really understand if that's something that you enjoy. And then the fun thing about software development, and I think part of what keeps me in the industry, is I'm always needing to relearn new things. It's just a constant, because it moves so quickly. There's so many new concepts and ideas and technologies that are really created. It's an opportunity for me to continue to learn. So if anything, focus on how you learn the technology and not just a very deep understanding of a specific technology.
That's another thing that I want to flag, because I feel like today people are very, there's 2 schools of thought, being a generalist and knowing about a lot of different things, or being a specialist. And I feel like we're moving more into that generalist area, where, obviously software development is still one field, but then knowing, like you said, a lot of things within it, not just one specific area of it.
Yeah. What's interesting, a concept that we have in software engineering, and I don't know if it exists in other industries, is this idea of a T-shaped developer, right? So I have a broad spectrum of knowledge. It's kind of shallow, right? That's kind of that generalist field. And then the middle, that to finish out the T, I have a deep, deep knowledge or understanding or passion in a specific area of software development. So I think you're right. We are seeing a lot more generalists that then have a bit of a very focused specialization. So it may be things around security or performance or something along those lines. That's where their passions lie. And that's typically where they contribute to the team. And so if you can get multiple kind of T-shaped developers on your team that have different specializations or passions, you can really have a robust and high functioning team.
I have not heard that before, and I'm definitely going to have to steal it. Because I'm like, oh, I'm a T-shaped marketer. Yeah. So thank you. I hope it's okay. I'm just throwing out lots of questions to you, because this is such an area that I don't have a deep understanding of, but I know is so important for everything that we do. So I appreciate you answering all of my random questions.
Absolutely.
And I've worked with a few founders who are the non-technical founders of apps. What are some of the things that they should be considering, number one, when they want to start a software company or project, and finding the right partner to come in as the technical advisor?
So I think that's a really, really good question. Bringing in a technical advisor, I think, is extremely important early on. One of the challenges that I see a lot of non-technical founders have is finding that person. And one of the mistakes I see, unfortunately, all too often is that a non-technical founder will find somebody to be their technical founder that may not be the best fit. They may not have a lot of experience, but because the non-technical founder doesn't feel like they can create the software or the technology on their own, they are more likely to give away things like a lot of equity in the company and a lot of control over what's being built. And unfortunately, that doesn't always go very well. And so I think I would always encourage a non-technical founder to find someone who they can, maybe pay on like an hourly or a monthly type retainer to go in and ask questions that doesn't necessarily have an equity stake in the business, but has a vested interest in the success of the business, if that makes sense. Yeah. So really just being someone there to answer questions, to make sure that things are moving in the right direction when they're evaluating potential co-founders or they're evaluating freelancers or development agencies to come in and help. Be there as a strong sounding board to really take a close look and provide unbiased opinions on, is this the right person for that particular role? So I always encourage folks to co-founding a startup is very much like finding a partner in marriage. And so really finding that right person is extremely important, especially early on. So I would encourage folks to kind of hold off and make sure that they really understand what they're getting into before they jump in.
Yeah. I think people get super excited that they found somebody who knows something that they don't. And so to your point, just jump in without making sure that everything's lined up. I think that's something that people do a lot in business, right? As entrepreneurs, particularly, we get really excited about things and sometimes don't take a step back and test and make sure that we have a strong foundation and we've asked all the right questions before we start moving into okay, let's just start creating.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And back to that kind of idea of validating the idea before we jump in.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. Nice. If somebody wanted to work with you, what does that look like? Do you have a process where you make sure that you're the right fit, whether it's with values or with workflows that you feel like you can really help them before, you jump in? Have you had to turn down clients because you realized that you weren't the person who could help them?
I absolutely have. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've had to, end engagements. I've had to, fire clients because it wasn't a good fit. We weren't a good match. And unfortunately, sometimes that happens. But for me, my process is I typically will start with a free consulting call. That's our opportunity to understand, what is the challenge that you have or the thing that you're trying to achieve. And maybe I am a good fit. And then from there, I've got a series of kind of engagement models. Typically, everything is based on a monthly engagement. So we'll start with kind of a discovery month and let's figure out what is it that we're doing and what are we trying to build and try and find ways that I can help. And then from there, we'll kind of ramp up with longer and more involved engagements. I have a couple different packages or offers, but I want to make sure that it's tailored to the needs of that business at that particular time. Yeah. So I really take into consideration the current team, the current trajectory, and, what is it that they need? Because I don't want to, charge someone for something that they just don't need.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's the way a lot of the work that we do on the marketing side is as well. You might have packages, but you have to tailor because everybody has specific needs, right? It's not cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep, you're right.
Is there anything that we haven't covered in the world of technology, software, things people should consider that you think is really important as the takeaway for my listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway I would encourage folks to think about is just really taking a step back and understanding the problem that we're solving. technology is very exciting. The idea of having an app in the app store is, exhilarating, but really understand the problem that we're trying to solve and how does technology fit into solving that particular problem. We may never need technology, and certainly not to the degree of, say, like a custom app on our phone. So really understanding what is it that we're trying to do, and are we going about it in the right way?
Thank you for that. Brian, do you have a favorite quote or family motto, mantra, some words that you have on your vision board that you try to uphold and live by?
I think the one that's ringing true for me most recently is, why not both? Oh. And I think a lot of times we try and say it's this or that, right? It's work or life, or we try and, figure out that balance. And so for me, I treat it like another engineering challenge of, why can't I have both? And to some degree, each side may suffer, but it's a way to continue to encourage and push myself to solve that particular problem or that challenge and live a much more full life because of it.
Yeah. Well, that is a great way to end our conversation. Why not both? Definitely some things to think about. Doesn't mean there's always balance, right? But it means that you can figure out a way to make everything happen. Fantastic. And the best way for people to reach you is your website?
Either my website, brianchildress.co, or on LinkedIn. I encourage folks to find me there, connect, send me a message. I'm happy to get in touch.
Okay. Brian, thank you so much for helping kind of disseminate and dispel some clouds and myths around software and the future of software development. Things for people to consider and think about when they're going on a journey, if they even need to create something new, if there's a solution that's out there, how to build successful teams, and what to do with testing and ideating before you even get to the point of creation. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. And thank you to our listeners and viewers for coming to another episode of Your Brand Amplified. I'm here with Brian Childress, and I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithanika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithanika.